Imagine a B-52 bomber taking off, and within 90 minutes, it rains bombs on Chinese nukes, annihilating them in an instant.
We're going to leave Afghanistan, but we're going to leave it with strength and dignity. We're going to keep Bagram, one of the biggest air bases in the world. We gave it to them for nothing.
Sounds like a Hollywood plot, doesn't it? But that's exactly the kind of deterrence that Trump wants to turn into reality.
Dear compatriots, to the people of Afghanistan, to the Muslim people of Afghanistan, we assure you that we will not negotiate away even an inch of our soil.
Forget nukes. Even the lifelines of China and Russia, their critical industries, would always be lurking under the shadow of fear. It's like a real-life Mission Impossible. A mission so daring that, if accomplished, could rewrite the balance of power in Asia forever. September 18th, 2025, London. President Donald Trump spoke at a press conference. He said, "We're trying to get Bagram Airbase back, and if Afghanistan doesn't give it, bad things are going to happen." This statement quickly drew international attention. Then the response came. Afghanistan responded immediately. Foreign Minister Amir Khan Muttaqi stated clearly, "Not even an inch of our soil will be given to the Americans." The stance was clear that there would be no negotiations or compromises. It seemed like a bluff from a dead nation, except history had a different take. The US spent 20 years, over $2.3 trillion in Afghanistan, only to leave with the Taliban back in power. After all, it's called the graveyard of empires for a reason. But this time the plan is different. It has 3 strategies to make it almost a guaranteed success. Something that needs to reach out to more people, because YouTube doesn't support videos covering war topics. But you can help us fight back by clicking the like button. Thank you. The US is ready to move heaven and earth to reclaim it, because Bagram isn't just another base, it's a masterpiece in every aspect. Bagram Air Base is located in Afghanistan's Parwan province, about 37 miles north of Kabul, surrounded by the towering peaks of the Hindu Kush Mountains. At its peak, the base covered an area of approximately 24 square kilometers, that's about 9.3 square miles, making it one of the largest and most fortified military installations in the world. But this isn't what scares China the most. At the center of the base is a dual runway system, built to handle the largest aircraft ever made. The new runway is 3,602 meters long, about 2,000 feet longer than before, and 11 inches thicker than the old one, giving it the strength to handle even the largest aircraft, like the C-5 Galaxy, the C-17 Globemaster, the B-52 bomber, B-2 bombers, or a Boeing 747. A second runway ensures flights can continue even during maintenance. Every part of these runways was designed to handle constant heavy use, making Bagram a powerhouse of military aviation. Bagram also gives the US a front row seat to China's most sensitive frontier. Mind you, no other American base comes this close. Just about 92 kilometers or 57 miles from Xinjiang, barely over an hour's flight, it's right next to some of Beijing's most critical nuclear and missile sites. When news broke in 2025 that Washington planned to retake Bagram, China reacted pretty sharply. Beijing warned that Afghanistan's future must rest with its own people, and cautioned against moves that would stir up confrontation. Officials stressed respect for Afghan sovereignty while voicing deep concern over US forces operating so close to Xinjiang's nuclear facilities. Backed by Russia, Iran, and Pakistan, China called the move a provocation that threatened regional peace and vowed it would never allow another American foothold at its western doorstep. The reason behind this reaction is that Xinjiang is the same place where it hides its DF-21 and DF-26 launch systems, the so-called carrier killers and Guam killers, designed to keep American forces at bay. From Bagram, all of that is in plain sight. The targets that Beijing count on to stay untouchable will be in clear reach. The DF-21 can travel over 1,500 kilometers. That's about 930 miles. And the DF-26 nearly 4,000 kilometers, about 2,500 miles. Both are stationed across Xinjiang, under layers of tunnels and silos buried into the desert. This is where China keeps part of its nuclear backbone, possibly even early DF-41 ICBMs. China fears it the most, not just for what's stored there now, but for what it plans to hide there in the future. China currently has around 600 nuclear warheads here, and is planning to expand to roughly 1,000 in the coming years. Xinjiang plays a central role in this expansion. It provides the space to build hundreds of new silos and mobile missile sites, allowing China to grow a more survivable and hardened nuclear arsenal. For the US, this poses a serious strategic threat. These missiles, especially the DF-26 with its 4,000-kilometer range, could reach US allies, bases, or military forces in the region, including Guam, South Korea, and Japan, with little warning. But China knows this threat very well. Missiles can be moved or hidden, but its true backbone, its critical industries, cannot. Xinjiang is China's secret backbone for both military power and critical industry. Satellite imagery shows hundreds of new construction sites, including the massive Hami and Yumin silo fields, potentially holding over 100 new ICBMs. But the bigger threat is that Xinjiang is also a hub for critical minerals and defense manufacturing. Lithium, beryllium, titanium, magnesium, along with solar-grade polysilicon, flow from the region into China's military and industrial supply chains. Along with nukes and industries, major facilities like Malan Airbase and Lap Nur, along with over 360 PLA military installations, make Xinjiang the most heavily militarized region in western China. But from Bagram, these aren't hidden. The base gives the US direct eyes through drones, signal intercepts, and high-altitude surveillance on every launch field, storage site, and radar sweep coming from western China. Runways at Bagram can handle the heavy hitters, B-52s, B-1Bs, and long-range strike bombers, carrying precision cruise missiles like JASSM-ER. If ordered, they can reach Chinese missile hubs within hours. Land-based systems like ATACMS could target command bunkers or logistic nodes without needing to cross deep into China. In short, Bagram isn't just close, it's positioned like a scalpel, aimed at the heart of China's Western missile and military network. Everything sounds very fascinating, except it's not. The US is going to face a hard time getting this base, or I should say getting it back again. After the 9/11 attacks on September 11, 2001, the world changed overnight. Nearly 3,000 Americans were killed in a series of coordinated strikes by al-Qaeda, led by Osama bin Laden. The US traced the entire network back to Afghanistan, where the Taliban regime had sheltered bin Laden and his fighters, letting them train, plan, and operate freely. Washington demanded the Taliban hand him over, but instead they offered to transfer him to a third country for a trial, an offer the US rejected. The refusal became the trigger. On October 7, 2001, America launched Operation Enduring Freedom, backed by the UK, to destroy al-Qaeda and topple the Taliban government. It was the start of a 20-year war that would reshape Afghanistan and define an era of US foreign policy. Soon after the attack began, US forces seized an old Soviet-built airfield north of Kabul Bagram Air Base. The base dated back from the 1950s. From Bagram, the US controlled the war. Early airstrikes and special operations flew from there to help the Northern Alliances drive the Taliban out of Kabul, Kandahar, and the Tora Bora. Thousands of bombing runs, drone missions, and close air support sorties launched from its runways. But it wasn't just a base, it was America's lifeline. The base wasn't just for combat. It was the logistical lifeline of the entire war. Troops rotated through its airstrips, supplies and fuel poured in daily, and medvac choppers brought the wounded home. Bagram's hospital treated countless American and Afghan personnel who never made it back to the front. It was also the core of US intelligence operations. Inside heavily guarded compounds, the CIA and JSOC ran covert programs and interrogations. The Bagram Detention Center soon became infamous for human rights abuses, torture allegations, indefinite detentions, and the ghosts of the war on terror that the world would later question. The base facilitated rapid deployment of US and coalition ground troops to various regions, including counterinsurgency efforts in Helmand, Kandahar, and the rugged Northeast. It was a hub for Joint Special Operations Command missions, targeting high-value targets, and also coordinated NATO and allied troop movements through International Security Assistance Force, or ISAF. This is how crazy Bagram City was. Wait, did I just say city? Because it literally was. It has a 50-bed hospital with operating rooms and a trauma bay, which can handle serious injuries at any time. Housing for over 40,000 people, including barracks, dormitories, dining halls, recreation centers, and even restaurants. Fuel and ammunition storage are massive, with a 5.7 million gallon monthly fuel capacity and facilities that reduce the need for fuel convoys. Maintenance workshops and engineering facilities let the base repair and expand itself without outside help. Strategically, Bagram can operate almost entirely on its own. Its 30-megawatt power plant, water and sewer systems, and advanced drainage networks kept it running even in tough conditions. Security is tight, with hardened perimeters, detention facilities, and emergency response teams ready for any situation. The human and financial cost was enormous. Over 2,456 US military personnel died in Afghanistan, many during attacks on Bagram itself, with 207,770 military members wounded. Civilian deaths numbered in the hundreds of thousands, many caused by airstrikes and drone attacks coordinated from the base, including inadvertent strikes on convoys and villages. Taliban rocket and mortar attacks frequently targeted Bagram, causing U.S. and contractor fatalities. The U.S. spent roughly $815.7 billion on military operations, and another $130 billion on reconstruction and humanitarian programs. Over $2.3 trillion in total once long-term care and interest were counted. Bagram also saw the dark side of operations. Several incidents brought controversy. High-profile drone strikes resulted in civilian casualties, including attacks on weddings and funerals. Leaked reports revealed harsh interrogation methods at the Bagram prison, fueling international and domestic criticism. Insider attacks by Afghan forces or Taliban sympathizers occasionally breached the base, leading to U.S. troop casualties. As the years went by, the war dragged on. The Taliban regrouped. Public patience in America faded. Trillions were spent, thousands were dead, and the Afghan government, built with so much U.S. support, was crumbling under corruption and division. Between 2018 and 2020, Washington started to look for a way out. Peace talks in Doha led to a deal with the Taliban, promising withdrawal in exchange for future security guarantees. The world was about to change forever. In 2021, President Biden made the final call. The U.S. would leave Afghanistan for good. On July 2nd, 2021, under the cover of darkness, American troops evacuated Bagram without even informing their Afghan counterparts. By morning, the base that had defined 2 decades of war stood silent. Weeks later, the Taliban walked through its gates without a fight. Kabul fell soon after, ending America's longest war in chaos. In the end, Bagram became more than a base. It was the face of America's presence in Afghanistan, its strength, its mistakes, and its burden. From its runways, wars were fought, and lives were lost. When the U.S. left, that silence that followed wasn't just the sound of withdrawal. It was the closing of a 20-year chapter written in blood, sacrifice, and the heavy cost of unfinished wars. But just 4 years later, something changed. That was the realization. When Trump returned to power, he realized one thing. The U.S. had to get this base back, either by hook or crook. Does this mean re-entering the graveyard of empires once again? After losing thousands of soldiers and spending trillions of dollars? Actually, yes, but not in the way the US operated earlier. You see, the US has 2 options. The first is achieving everything without any bloodshed. The second option probably results in potential bloodshed. The US could take Bagram with the help of the military. Now, you might think the US had to leave Afghanistan because it couldn't beat the Taliban, or that's what many people remember. But that exit happened after years of trying to build a democratic Afghan state, which meant US forces were doing a huge, messy job. It was trying to maintain democracy in Afghanistan. That included nation building, training police, running elections, and not just fighting. But if the US military had to simply seize and hold one airbase, then they could do it much more easily. For example, in 2001, US troops moved fast to secure airfields around Kabul, and it did it very easily. But this time, it would be 10 times harder, because the dragon has its claws sunk deep inside of Afghanistan. Over the past few years, they have built a close relationship with China, which sees Afghanistan as strategically important and rich in resources. China has given the Taliban economic support, drones, and possibly other military tools. Using these, the Taliban could attack supply routes, jam US communications, and use drones to harass aircraft at the base. They also know the land very well and can send up ambushes, roadside bombs, and hit-and-run attacks to make it more costly for US forces. The Taliban will also fight back in ways that would make holding the base very hard. China could also provide intelligence, money, and political support, helping the Taliban plan attacks more effectively and block international approval for US military presence. It means regaining a foothold at Bagram won't happen overnight. It will depend on careful planning, smart leverage, and patience in navigating Afghanistan's complex political landscape. This is where the first option comes into play. No bloodshed, no lives lost, just pure chess moves. American envoys could open direct talks with Taliban leaders, offering them things they want, counterterrorism cooperation or economic concessions, in return for limited or joint use of the airfield. A second approach leans on strategic leverage. Washington can put incentives on the table for steady humanitarian relief, development money, or diplomatic support to make access politically valuable. The path is simple diplomacy and negotiation, but experts say the US has a better option. In fact, the best ones. They could also use money and recognition as tools. The US still holds most of Afghanistan's frozen foreign reserves, about $7 billion in the New York Fed, part of roughly $9.5 billion in total. Releasing some of this money, giving a one-time payment, or providing annual transfers could be a strong incentive for the Taliban to cooperate. So it's literally their own money which the US could just give back to them, and they don't have to spend a single penny from their own pocket. On the diplomatic side, the US hasn't fully recognized the Taliban government yet. Offering recognition, or at least more diplomatic ties officially, could be part of a deal to gain limited or shared access to Bagram Airbase. By combining these approaches, releasing funds, providing payments, offering development aid, and easing diplomatic restrictions, the US could make it attractive for the Taliban to allow access to Bagram, while keeping the option to push harder if talks don't work. So, the three secret strategies the US could use are 1. Money, 2. Recognition, and 3. Brute force. If the first two options don't work, the US knows very well how to use the third option. It has proved that in the past several times. Diego Garcia sits in the middle of the Indian Ocean, and it was built the hard way by relocating populations and redrawing maps. Britain separated the Chagos Islands from the Mauritius before independence, creating the British Indian Ocean Territory, and cleared the islands to make way for a military base. Thousands of Chagosians were forcibly removed so runways and ports could be built. Today, the island remains a strategic staging point, and the legal battle continues. Mauritius claims sovereignty, but a 2024 UK-Mauritius agreement allows US and UK forces for decades to come. Guantanamo Bay in Cuba shows another approach. After the Spanish-American War, the US forced Cuba to accept a base as a condition of independence under the Platt Amendment. Essentially, Cuba was told, no base, no independence. The lease is technically perpetual for a small annual payment, but Cuba has not cashed the check since 1959 and considers the occupation illegal. Despite this, the US has maintained control for more than a century. In Iraq, the strategy shifted to post-invasion leverage. After toppling Saddam Hussein in 2003, the US built massive bases like Victory Base Complex, Camp Liberty, and Balad Air Base. When Iraq later requested the US withdrawal, America reminded Baghdad that it had footed the bill for base construction, effectively making the argument, you built it, you bought it. This combination of military presence and negotiation pressure kept US influence strong throughout the occupation years. This is how the US operates different bases in other countries. It is a range of strategies, sometimes subtle, sometimes coercive, and sometimes outright force. These historical episodes aren't just history. They read like a menu of tactics Washington can borrow when it comes time to regain access to Bagram. The possibility of US control over Bagram enraged China, but it pissed off another country too. That was Russia. You see, Bagram sits just below the underbelly of Russia's sphere, right where Central Asia begins and Moscow starts to fade in its reach. Only a short distance from Tajikistan's capital, Dushanbe, and close to Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Kyrgyzstan. It sits nearer to Russia's southern edge than any other US-controlled base. From here, America can see directly into a region that has always been critical to Moscow's sense of security. These Central Asian nations were once part of the Soviet Union, tightly linked to Russia for decades. Even today, Moscow tries to hold sway through trade, energy, and military partnerships. But the region isn't as secure as it looks. The borders are long and thin, the terrain is hard to guard, and local politics often shift. Compared to Russia's heavily fortified western front facing NATO, this southern stretch is open and exposed, and that's what makes it valuable. From Bagram, the US can quietly watch and, when needed, reach straight into Russia's key posts. Sensors, surveillance flights, and listening posts here can monitor troop movements around Russia's 201st military base in Tajikistan, and air operations out of Kant in Kyrgyzstan, while the long runways and tanker support let strike aircraft and cruise missiles push outward towards deeper targets. Within a few hours, fighters or long-range bombers from Bagram could threaten nearby Russian missile garrisons, and even the hardened command complex at Kosvinsky Mountain. Beyond these strategic missile fields, Bagram gives reach to strike or disrupt key war industries and energy choke points, like tank factories, heavy engineering plants, and the Volga aircraft and drone hubs, or the Orenburg gas processing plant, and pipeline arteries that feed Russia's exports. From this single airfield, the United States can see what's happening, shape the battlefield, and put pressure on a string of Russian military and industrial nodes that lie within its operational grasp. Russia and China both fear their energy sources getting into danger. For Russia, the threat is direct, but for China, it's indirect. Right past the border runs the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, the backbone of Beijing's Belt and Road Plan. Those highways, pipelines, and railways connecting Gwadar Port to Xinjiang all cut through territory the US can observe directly from Bagram. And if needed, covert teams, special forces, CIA units can move in quietly to disrupt or gather intel. Cutting off Gwadar would hit China where it hurts the most: energy. Nearly 80% of China's oil imports still pass through the Strait of Malacca, a narrow maritime choke point patrolled by the US Navy and vulnerable to disruption. A scenario called China's Malacca Dilemma. Gwadar, connected via the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, gives Beijing a land-based alternative, allowing oil to bypass Malacca entirely and reach western China faster and more securely. If Gwadar were blocked with the help of Bagram, then China would be forced back onto the exposed Malacca route. Any disruption there could cause massive energy shortages, stall the economy, and jeopardize China's military readiness. That's why Gwadar is more than just a port. It's a strategic lifeline, a safety valve that China depends on to keep its energy flowing and its growth steady. Bagram also watches the PLA's Western Theater Command, the branch responsible for Tibet, Xinjiang, and China's borders with India and Central Asia. From this one base, the US can pick up Chinese military chatter, track missile tests, and map the patterns of rocket and air defense units across the region. Even the PLA's electronic networks and radar fields fall under this radar. Even if the Taiwan crisis ever breaks out, Bagram becomes the perfect second front. While China focuses east across the strait, Bagram lets the US hit west deep inside the country, forcing Beijing to split its defenses. Bombers, jammers, and special units could strike or pressure key logistics lines, fuel depots, and missile bases, stretching the PLA thin from coast to desert. But why is the US preparing for future wars? The answer lies in the actions or threats which China poses to Taiwan almost every day. Over the past year, Chinese warplanes have turned Taiwan's skies into a front line. Dozens of aircraft, sometimes more than 50 at once, cross into Taiwan's air defense identification zone, flying in formation with bombers and electronic warfare planes. Each mission simulates a blockade or an invasion, keeping Taiwan's Air Force on edge and its pilots in the air almost daily. These are not simple drills, they're rehearsals. On the ground, China's preparations are just as deliberate. Civilian ferries along the coast are being converted into amphibious assault vessels, capable of carrying troops, vehicles, and supplies straight into Taiwan's beaches. Satellite images from Fujian, the closest point to Taiwan, show these modifications happening in real time. It's a quiet transformation of China's civilian fleet into an invasion force, ready to move when ordered. Beyond the visible, Beijing's war runs through wires and screens. Cyber units strike Taiwan's government systems and infrastructure, aiming to cripple command networks before a single missile is ever fired. At the same time, disinformation campaigns flood social media, and bounties are placed on Taiwanese officers, all part of a larger effort to divide, confuse, and weaken morale from the inside out. Chinese strategy doesn't just stop at the digital front. It's also isolating Taiwan diplomatically and economically, pressing nations to cut formal ties and weaponizing trade. In 2025, Beijing abruptly banned imports of Taiwanese pineapple and shrimp, sending a message that economics can be as sharp as any missile. Meanwhile, the People's Liberation Army stages massive naval and missile drills in the Taiwan Strait, encircling the island on paper before doing it in practice. Each exercise grows bolder, timed carefully around Taiwan's elections or major events to amplify the pressure. During Taiwan's 2024 presidential inauguration, for example, PLA ships and missile units surrounded the island in a full-scale rehearsal of what an invasion might look like. All of it paints a clear picture. China isn't waiting for the perfect moment, it's creating it, step by step, making sure that when the day comes, Taiwan will already be exhausted, isolated, and surrounded. And it's not just Taiwan. It becomes equally important for the US to prepare for Russia because of what it did to Ukraine. Let's have a look at how Russia proved itself as America's biggest threat once again. While Beijing quietly pressures Taiwan, on the other side of the world, a much larger and more violent storm is breaking over Europe. Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine on February 24, 2022, attacking from all directions, north through Belarus, east from Donbass, and south via Crimea. Within hours, missile strikes and air raids hammered Kyiv, Kharkiv, and Mariupol, marking the beginning of Europe's largest war since World War II. From that day, the United States became Ukraine's lifeline. Most of the support came through quick drawdowns from US stockpiles, the Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative, and foreign military financing. This aid included advanced weaponry and systems like HIMARS rocket systems, Patriots and NASAMS air defenses, Javelin and Stinger missiles, Bradley infantry fighting vehicles, M1 Abrams tanks, drones, radars, and precision-guided munitions. As the war dragged on, emergency aid turned into long-term defense contracts and ongoing funding for Ukraine's government, armed forces, and energy sector. US intelligence sharing, battlefield communication systems, and advanced soldier training made Ukraine's defenses sharper and far more coordinated. Alongside weapons, America led the world in economic and humanitarian assistance. Billions went into stabilizing Ukraine's energy grid, rebuilding hospitals, supplying food and medicine, and supporting refugees across Europe. Still, despite that enormous backing, Russia controls nearly 19% of Ukraine's land as of October of 2025. It holds most of Luhansk and Donetsk, major portions of Zaporizhia and Kherson, and the entirety of Crimea. Ukraine's infrastructure has been ripped apart. Power plants, grids, and water systems have been struck repeatedly, causing rolling blackouts and shortages. Roads, railways, and bridges in Donbass and southern regions were bombed to disrupt movement and aid delivery. Schools and hospitals lie in ruins across frontline towns. Between February of 2022 and October of 2025, the civilian toll in Ukraine has been devastating. Over 12,650 civilians have been killed, and more than 29,392 injuries since the conflict began. Internally, over 3.6 million people have been displaced within the country, and approximately 6.8 million have sought refuge abroad. It is the largest refugee crisis Europe has faced since World War II. In places like Bucha, Mariupol, and Kherson, investigators uncovered mass graves and evidence of torture. Ukraine's economy has shrunk by a third. Its industrial heartlands, steel, coal, and manufacturing, are destroyed or occupied. Agriculture has collapsed in mined or bombed regions. Healthcare and the education system have broken down, leaving deep scars of poverty and trauma. On the battlefield, Ukraine's losses remain heavy. Thousands of tanks, artillery pieces, and drones are destroyed often faster than allies can replace them. Yet, with Western technology, intelligence, and grit, the country keeps resisting. As of 2025, Russia continues pressing deeper into Donetsk, relying on mass recruitment and war of attrition tactics. Sanctions haven't stopped Moscow. It's found lifelines through trade with China, Iran, North Korea, and Turkey, keeping its arms production running. What began in 2022 as a lightning invasion has turned into a drawn-out, grinding conflict, reshaping Europe's security map. Ukraine fights for survival with Western backing, while Russia clings to its occupied zones despite global isolation and massive losses. The war has become a brutal test of endurance, with no real end in sight, and Bagram could potentially play a role in containing Russia. Because the base doesn't stop at runways. There are over 110 hardened aircraft revetments, each protected by blast walls, keeping fighter jets, bombers, and transport planes safe from attack. 3 huge hangars can hold multiple helicopters or fighter jets all at once, and over 13 hectares of ramp space provide room for parking, maintenance, and cargo operations. From the sky to the ground, Bagram is built for constant activity and readiness. Command and control at Bagram are just as advanced. The base has multi-level facilities for coordinating operations and processing intelligence in real time. Satellite communication arrays keep the base connected across the world, and the control tower, with its radar systems, manages the flow of flights with precision. The base can run air, ground, intelligence, and logistics operations at the same time, giving it reach across Central Asia. What makes Bagram truly valuable is that it is self-sufficient and ready for action. For the United States, Bagram isn't just a base. It's a hub of power, strategy, and readiness, a place from which the US can watch, plan, and act whenever it needs to. It also allows the US to move instantly with full autonomy in part of the world where distance and politics often slow everything down. From this one location, Washington can shape outcomes in Afghanistan, northern Pakistan, along Iran's eastern border, and throughout every Central Asian state, while also keeping a close watch on Russian movements to the north and Chinese influence to the east. Where other US bases are confined to limited regional tasks, Bagram stands apart as a command post with reach, freedom, and focus unlike anywhere else. Whether the US succeeds in getting the base back or not is something only time will tell. Thanks for watching.